Hi, thank you for coming on to this documentary with us. Would you be able to introduce yourself and what you do?
Okay, my name's Ron Hodkinson. I'm technical director of a company called Ammotto, and we actually develop zero-emission ammonia engines. These are diesel engines that run on ammonia instead of diesel.
I'm just going to go straight into it with all the questions.
Yeah.
So my first question is, from a Western perspective, how do you view and evaluate China's development in the past 70 years, 75 years, especially in the past 20 years in terms of in its economic development?
Well, China has been pulling itself up by its bootstraps. It used to have a very agricultural economy, and it has slowly been replacing that with an industrial economy. It didn't happen evenly throughout the country. Essentially, you've got the centres in Beijing, Shanghai, and Hong Kong and Guangdong province, which were the initial places where industrialisation happened, and the rest of the country was way behind that. And they have gradually brought industrialisation to a bigger and bigger proportion of the country, and they are almost in the situation now where the whole country has been modernised. From the point of view of what they've been doing, their initial strategy was to produce Western products, i.e. Western design products at low cost. Initially, the quality was not good, but they soon overcame that problem, and in recent years, the quality has been as good as anything made in the West. But in 2015, they implemented something called the Made in China strategy, and that is to move to high added value products that are actually made in China. And next year will be the 10th anniversary of this, and they're well along the road now. So, for example, they are the world leader in solar panels, in wind turbines, in electric cars, and also they've got many initiatives in artificial intelligence. They are on the cusp of producing their own major passenger aircraft to compete with Boeing and Airbus, and in many other areas. And given the likelihood that there's going to be a trade war with the US in the near future, this leads to a shift of strategy away from consumer goods and into high added value products.
Thank you very much. And additionally, in a world where the face of China can't be ignored, how do you see its role evolving in the coming decades?
That is going to be very interesting, because in essence, everybody is going to be affected by forthcoming changes in the global climate. And in some ways, China is well prepared for this, and in other ways, they are at a disadvantage, particularly because of their dependence on coal as a fuel source. And everybody is going to have to reevaluate how they do things to survive the next 100 years.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And going into our second question, what do you think are the most efficient measures that should be implemented at an accelerated rate to create better relationships between global economies and the environment on a global scale?
That needs careful consideration at the present moment. The first major problem is to understand what is actually happening to the climate. In the last 12 months, we've been on the threshold of the global climate going into thermal runaway, as Al Gore predicted in the 1990s. It's taken rather longer than he predicted, but the basis of his predictions were absolutely correct. The consequences of this are that in the next decade, we are going to see global temperatures go to 40 degrees. We're going to see the cloud base go up to 60,000 feet. We're going to see the weather bands move northwards, many other changes. And the key things that we need to achieve is to reduce CO2 and methane emissions and slow down the rate of rise at which the ice is melting in the Arctic and Antarctic. And basically, technologies that can help in this are really important. The most important thing is we are going to have to replace hydrocarbons, probably with liquid ammonia as a fuel, and having engines that burn liquid ammonia is a key enabler to being able to do that. And if we were to replace petrol and diesel with ammonia, we would need to scale up global ammonia production by about a factor of 100 over the next 10 or 20 years. In an ideal world, it would be green ammonia made from natural resources. But the reality is that is far too slow and expensive to implement quickly. And without doubt, we will have to do it using natural gas with Haber-Bosch and then sequestrate the CO2 from the process. But one of the big differences between the hydrocarbon cycle and the ammonia cycle is that you've only got about 30% of the CO2 to sequestrate in the ammonia cycle, because there is absolutely no CO2 emissions at the point of use, only in making it. And so one is viable for sequestration, but to sequestrate hydrocarbons is not economically viable, as they have found out to their cost so far. So essentially, bringing forward ammonia production and engines which burn ammonia is probably the key enabling technologies to bring this forward. Making ammonia is not without its risks. One of the biggest problems is that you must not put NOx and nitrous oxide into the atmosphere. And to achieve that, two things are critically important. One is that you make the nitrogen for the synthesis by using distillation and not other methods, and the reason is it's totally pure and has no oxygen in it, so you don't form NOx. And the other thing is the actual second stage Haber-Bosch combination process has to be done below 500 degrees centigrade so that you do not produce NOx in that process. And if you stick to those two steps, even if we increase ammonia production by a factor of 100, you will not have problems. The most important thing that has to happen is that a standardised 3,000 tonnes a day ammonia plant has to be designed, certified and approved so that the quality and the emissions are closely controlled and we don't jump out of the frying pan into the fire and basically get into the situation that we are replacing CO2 emissions with NOx emissions and overall not fixing the global warming problem.
And in your opinion, creating this zero emissions through ammonia-based engines,
Yes.
what impact do you think this will have on the economies?
Let's say, from an economic point of view, if you make what we term grey ammonia, this is, grey ammonia is ammonia that is produced and the CO2 emissions are put into the atmosphere. That is the cheapest form of ammonia, which is about $270 a tonne. If you produce blue ammonia, which is where you sequestrate the CO2 and put it in the ground, that costs about $30 more. And if we're going to use natural gas, of which we have 300 years reserves at the moment, that keeps the oil industry in business, and it also allows us to switch to ammonia quickly. Now, one of the things that is likely to happen in the next few years, with the much higher temperatures, demand for gas for heating is going to fall, and demand for electricity for air conditioning is going to rise. And this, in places like the UK, is going to make a lot of natural gas available for conversion to ammonia, which otherwise would have been burnt in heating.
Thank you very much. And heading into our third question, focusing on China's economic development and deepening reform and opening up in the past 20 years, particularly its role in the green industry as an evolving core of its development strategy. How do you judge the measures China has taken to promote its green transition?
They are doing a good job at the moment. One of the sad things right now is that electric car performance is adequate at the moment, but not good in one key area, which is braking. And the main reason for that is because the weight of the batteries are far too heavy. One of the big breakthroughs that is coming in the next couple of years is so-called solid-state batteries, which will literally halve the weight of the batteries for the same amount of power. And that will go some way towards improving the performance, because right now it is much better to use a hybrid car which only has about 10% of the batteries in it than it is to use a full battery electric, because essentially the hybrid car weighs roughly the same as a petrol or diesel car, whereas the pure battery electric car is double the weight. So technology absolutely matters, and ultimately we're going to end up with a zero emission ammonia engine and a self-charging hybrid, and that is the ultimate solution to the problem. Now, China is making huge progress with ammonia engines. They have a company called Guangdong Automotive Company who've been working with Toyota, and they have a 2-litre ammonia engine ready for production. The main difference between it and ours is theirs is the so-called dual fuel concept, where they use a mixture of ammonia with diesel, and therefore it isn't truly zero emission, whereas the solution we use is zero emission.
Thank you. And what impact do you think these initiatives will have on the future of global economy?
That is a very interesting question at the moment. The big problem right now is that current solutions to global warming are not cost effective. And that is why the current estimates for fixing global warming are of the order of about 8 years worth of global GDP of about $100 trillion a year. At that cost, it's never going to happen. And one of the biggest challenges we face in the next few years is to develop better ways of doing things to bring that cost down. And just to give you a for example, in UK, you can buy a very good petrol or diesel car brand new for £20,000. A battery electric is 40,000. A fuel cell car is 60,000. If we use zero emission ammonia engines, that will add 10% to the cost of a diesel car, and without doubt far more people will buy that as a solution compared to the present solutions that are on offer. And it is initiatives like this that are the key to essentially bringing global warming under control. And there is no doubt about it, there is a major need for a huge development effort in the next few years to try and find better solutions to global warming.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us on this documentary about green energy. It's very appreciated.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for having me.
Thank you.